first by thanking everyone for being here. We are all here to discuss a moment in Howard University history. And a lot of you who are here in the chat in our Zoom tonight were direct participants in that moment. So we invite you to use the chat in the Q&A to share reflections as we engage in dialogue. And then after we finish our dialogue, we will take some of those questions from you. And then finally, this is being simulcast via YouTube. So please feel free to share the link in the chat that I left in the chat so that those who may not be able to join us here can also view the program. April R. Silver recently commented that there are two Howards, but she left it there, almost as if to signify that what is known ain't gotta be explained. It reminded me of the famous scholar, activist, and former dean, Kelly Miller's statement in the 1916 Howard University yearbook. Quote, "Those who feel it know." There is a Howard hidden from view that nevertheless comes to the surface often and forcefully because it represents an alternative Black political culture, to use the words of Cedric Robinson. An alternative Black political culture that exists in mass among our people. A political culture that is more communitarian than individualistic. It is more inventive than imitative. I'm a product of that political culture, and it confronted me while I was a student at Howard University in the early 2000s. April R. Silver and Ras J. Baraka were and are also a part of that political culture. And it is it, not necessarily them, it is it that produced the moment of 1989, a moment where we saw an attempt to remake Howard University, or at the very least, prevent its remaking. That year, the Board of Trustees, with the backing of the president, appointed Lee Atwater to a position. Atwater, who was beginning a new term as the Republican National Committee chairman, wanted to recruit Black elites to the GOP. But it was the GOP that had recently utilized a racist dog whistle in the form of the William Horton advertisement to help extend the rightward shift begun under Ronald Reagan. Atwater was the architect of the ad. It directly targeted Black people, many of whom looked like the first generation students at Howard University at the time. So a group known as Black Nia F.O.R.C.E decided to resist. This group was founded by Ras J. Baraka, the son of Amiri and Amina Baraka, a student activist, a poet, and a budding leader on campus. By 1989, the leadership of the group was passed to April R. Silver, an English major, who among other things had been studying under poets Sonia Sanchez and E. Ethelbert Miller. They, with the help of many organizers, took control of the administration building on March 6, 1989. We Are Worth Fighting For, A History of the Howard University Student Protest of 1989 is a work that I wrote in deep collaboration with the members of Black Nia F.O.R.C.E. It tells the story of this moment, but it also tells a larger story of the force of that alternative Black political culture and how it converged to extend a tradition of Black student activism at Black colleges and universities. The late 80s and 90s were an important site for that work, and that work continues. I am joined by Ms. Silver, who would eventually found and remains the CEO of AKILA WORKSONGS, a direct extension of the work of Black Nia F.O.R.C.E, and now Mayor Ras J. Baraka, Mayor of the City of Newark, New Jersey, whose political career is rooted in this moment as well. And so I would like to first begin with a question for both of you. And it's a very simple question, but I think it helps orient this conversation in important ways. And that question is, why did you attend Howard at all in the first place? And what were your first impressions of that space in the state of Black education in the late 1980s?
What do you want to answer first?
It's up to you all.
All right, I'll go first. And but before I answer the question, if I may say hats off to you, Dr. Myers, for the work that you did. And as you said, this deep collaboration with the organizers of the Howard University protests in 1989. Um, I want to say what's up to my brother, Mayor Baraka, as well. And definitely also just give thanks. You know, how we do, we start off and we just give thanks to our ancestors and all those who came before us. So I know we'll, talk about that a little bit more. But to answer your question specifically, you know, I love to tell this story about uh, my, going to Howard. Um, in high school, I was not interested and was just weary of this. You got to prepare for college. You got to prepare for college in 10th and 11th grade. And I just gave into it because in my home, it was just expected that I would go to college, but I didn't want to think about it. I just had to, I just wasn't excited about it. So somewhere around the 11th grade, I went to one of the college fairs. And I should say that I was born in New York, but I went to junior high and high school in Los Angeles. So 11th grade at Hamilton High School in Los Angeles, I went to this college fair reluctantly, dutifully, and I saw this sea of white people with the different tables. And then I saw these Black people off in the margins. And I was like, wow, this looks interesting. I walked over to the table and was introduced to this thing called Howard University. I had no idea. This was 85, I guess. I had no idea that there was such a thing as Howard University. I had no idea that there was such a thing as a Black university. And I was drawn in immediately to see the pictures, to see the enthusiasm of those recruiters. I think it was a man and a woman. And when they started talking about all of the people who graduated from Howard, I was instantly converted. I knew in that moment that that's where I was going to go to go to college. I just knew. I had never heard of that. That there was no such thing. Um, so I applied. I was so sure that I was going to get in. It is the only school, the only university that I applied to. My plan was to apply to Howard, and I had discovered that Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles had a late application process. So the plan was if I didn't get into Howard, I would stay in Los Angeles and go to Loyola Marymount. My father said, if you stay here in Los Angeles, because we want you close to home, I'll buy you a car. But if you go to Howard, all of our resources are gonna, be to, send you back to the East Coast and, you do what you want, but you could stay and, you can have a car, and I was like, I hear you, that would be awesome, but I'm going to Howard. So of course that was 11th grade. Um, I got accepted April 21st, 1986 is when I received my letter of acceptance. I know the date. I still have the acceptance letter. And I cried. I absolutely cried when I got in. I couldn't believe how lucky I was to get into the only school that I applied to. I knew that I was supposed to be at this Black institution. I was looking forward to discovering more about me, more about my heritage. And this is not to say that I grew up in a household where there was a lack of conversation about Black heritage. Absolutely, that wasn't the case. We are, and we're a proud Black family. But I didn't grow up in a household where my parents were social justice activists. They were working class folks who tried to do the best that they could and wanted their oldest child to, and to be followed by their youngest child, just the two of us, um, to hopefully make a better life for themselves by going to college. So they weren't in the streets marching or anything of the sort. Working class folks. My father worked for the post office for decades. My mother was an executive assistant. So the fact that I could get in and go to Howard, I would have been a first generation graduate had I gone through the 4 years, which I did. It was just amazing. I cried. I still have the letter. I remember the day. And not to sound corny, but the rest is history. So my introduction by these college recruiters in 1985 is how I ended up entering Howard in August 1986. I just knew it was my destiny. There was no question about it.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here having this important discussion. It's always a pleasure to be hanging out with April. Uh, um, I actually I went to a college tour that the school gave that I wasn't supposed to be on the trip. Actually, I was and I wasn't because I didn't want to go. And I came to school late purposefully, and the bus was still in front of the school. And my guidance counselor, Rosita Holiday, said, "You're supposed to be on this trip." And I said, because I thought I was smarter than everybody at the time, that I don't have a permission slip. And if I don't have a permission slip, then you can't make me go on a trip. So she brought me into the building and called my father in the guidance counselor's office and got permission and basically forced me to go on a trip. And I came down to Howard University and I saw all of these Black people in school from all over the place studying things that some of the stuff I couldn't even pronounce. And I thought that this is exactly where I should be. That was like the best college recruiting tool that they ever could have, engaged us in, actually bringing us to the university and seeing it. So when I got there, I said, look, I absolutely positively have to come to school here.
Mhm.
And, my father went to school there as well. So that helped too. But I was not at that time in my life, not interested really in college that much, right? I thought I might stay locally, go to school here because my parents would want me to go to college. And so I was going to do it simply because of that. And I went to University High School, which was one of the better schools in the city. I just thought that it was a natural progression that you had to go to college. I wasn't enthused about it or excited about it or, even thought that Howard University was a place that I wanted to go, until they made me go down there. It's almost like divine intervention.
Mhm.
You know, I walked up into that school prepared to go to class and do what I normally do in school, and wound up that later on that day at Howard University. And so, as April said, that is exactly, in my mind where I was supposed to be. So I did everything in my power to get there. Obviously, I filled out the application. I did all the other kind of the work that I was supposed to do. Miss Holiday helped me, everybody else, and I got an acceptance letter. And I was excited, to go down there with all of the freshmen before everybody else showed up. Yeah.
Thank you. And I realized I didn't really introduce myself. For those who may not know me, again, my name is Joshua Myers. I teach at Howard University in the Africana Studies department. I am also a graduate of Howard University. And so we all share that idea of Kelly Miller's. If you don't feel it, you just don't know. But taking that, the 1980s are a very difficult time for the Black community, not just in the United States, but also globally. And so you have Reaganomics and all of that, what that entails. You also have the anti-apartheid struggle in Southern Africa. And you also have what's going on with people of color in Central America and in American, the American military and the Cold War. And Howard students, going back to the beginning of the decade, had been organizing, right? There had been some response. But as the stories were told to me, with your generation, the generation that came in the fall of 1986, it wasn't immediate, it wasn't automatic that you all became politically engaged. Can you talk about your journey to consciousness and how that manifested at Howard?
I grew up in a household where most of those things were happening. Big parties, people jumping up, giving diatribes on capitalism and reading poems in the middle of music. I mean, so it was a kind of, you know, wild scene. And, you know, my family in Newark was very, very, very engaged. Congress of African People here in the city of Newark, Committee for Unified Newark, a lot of organizing, a lot of police even attacks, all kind of things were happening to our family as children, while I was a child. And so in some instances, you start to move away from that, you know, because when you're a kid and everybody else is doing something different, you almost feel like you are an outcast. People talk about you because of your name, the way you dress, the things you're interested in. You don't celebrate Christmas. You don't have normal birthday parties, all this stuff. So you almost kind of move away from that because the rest of the society, the superstructure, is actually teaching you the opposite of that. Like the poetry I heard at poetry readings when I was a kid was never the poetry I heard in high school, right? So when I wrote poetry, I actually thought I was doing something wrong. Or that these people were not reading. If I heard Sonia Sanchez read a poem, it certainly didn't sound like the poetry that we studied in school, or Linton Kwesi Johnson, a dub poet, or you know, people that I heard growing up. And so when I got to Howard, I thought it would be easy to just leave all of that in Newark, and you know, that was my first inclination to do that. And I met a young man who was a part of an organization called Black United Youth. And he invited me to a meeting. And, you know, just out of curiosity, you know, you already, you know, they got a magnetic attraction because you've seen this stuff before. I went there and I went to the meeting and they were studying a book called Capitalism and Slavery. And I fell right in. I started reading and being a part of what they were doing. And it was almost like second nature, like, look, wow, this is, you know, this is probably what I should be doing. But I was trying to do both, right? I was trying to do that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I was cooling out with the New York crew and New Jersey and Philly and all those guys and wrecking havoc and doing what college students do. I was like 17, about to be 18 years old. Man, I was a kid. And when you look back on that, you see all the mistakes and stuff you made. I was just a child. And you know, when I started going to those meetings, I was trying to get them to convince other people to be a part of it. Like, hey, this is like, we should get all these other guys that I hang out with to be a part of this, because you know, they were trying to do a protest, a silent protest they were trying to do. And I remember I got Travis Harrell and Kevin Baxter, Kevin is still in New Jersey. He's in politics too, to come to rally with me. That was about it. Nobody else would do it. And so I decided to leave that organization and bring what they were doing to my friends. And that's how it began. That kind of thought process is really the way it happened. It just progressed like that. It wasn't like a well thought out kind of, it was like just an emotional reaction of a 17, 18-year-old boy who felt like, look, I'm tired of being over here and being an outcast. I'm just going to make both worlds collide. And that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really important lesson for political organizing. You know, people often talk about meeting people where they are, as if where they are is implicitly apolitical. But you know, the party scene, you know, that you all were connected to, you know, that had political potential as well. And so when you all created Black Nia F.O.R.C.E, you know, you, Carlisle Seeley, and others,
and all the stuff that was happening in New York and all of that at the time.
Yeah.
You had Howard Beach, you had Yusef Hawkins, Tawana Farley, got all of these things going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those things were a part of helping to educate people on where they lived.
Mm-hmm.
And this, so it wasn't like a far-fetched to get people to think that they should be a part of these things.
Yeah, and I was getting ready to say, and all of that came through the music. It came through hip hop. Right. And so, Ms. Silver, can you speak a little bit to your journey and how what Mayor Baraka is speaking to sort of was experienced in your world?
In terms of being politically educated, was that the crux?
Yes.
Yeah. My first organization, the one thing that I remember clearly as a freshman was the abundance of opportunity to be involved, to be engaged, to do something. And it was overwhelming, you know, it was absolutely overwhelming. I knew that I wanted to be more than just a student in the classroom. So my first, the very first organization that I joined was the California Club. Because remember, I'm a native New Yorker, but I'm coming to Howard from Los Angeles. And that was just me wanting to be involved and getting to know people. And then after that, I joined the Alpha Sweetheart Club because, you know, you're presented with, you know, Greek life or Black Greek life. And, you know, I had never been experienced or presented with any of that. But again, this was me searching to try to figure out what am I going to do because I want to be more than just a student. So along the way with me going on this journey of discovery and what's available and, you know, how do I use my talents and such, I ran, and I was writing for the Hilltop as well, right? So somewhere around 87, 88, I'm, you know, being introduced to this guy, Ras Baraka, who's going on tour and I'm covering events. I think I actually covered, and I think you put this in the book, Dr. Myers, that National Black Student Unity Conference. I think I'm saying the name wrong, but I think I covered it. So I'm being introduced to all of this political education and why I came to Howard in the first place. And I see this guy, Ras Baraka, with this young woman who at the time was Lisa Williamson. And I'm blown away, absolutely blown away. So it was complementary content and speaking engagements and events that, like you said, I was an English major, but also an African American studies minor. So all of this real live current commentary complemented what I was learning about a woman named Sonia Sanchez, you know, a man named Amiri Baraka, and I was like, wow, this is exactly what I wanted to get outside of the classroom. And then when I discovered this guy, Ras Baraka, who was so dynamic and speaking was the son of Amiri Baraka, I was like, whoa, lineage is right here, you know? So I'm following them around. I'm going to different events. I'm being politically educated. And it just spoke to my soul, right? Um, and then I started going to the Black Nia F.O.R.C.E meetings, which were newly formed, totally engrossed, inspired, intellectually stimulated. And I was like, wow, I'm learning so much. This is exactly where I want to be. This is what I want to learn. And as you mentioned in the book, I just start promoting the organization just because. I would make up flyers. I used to be a work study student at the Department of Energy. And so, in my enthusiasm to be a part of, not even a part of, but just to go to the meetings on Fridays and to share my enthusiasm and my love of what I was learning without anybody asking. I didn't know anybody. I just started making up my own flyers and posting them everywhere that I could on campus. And was particularly proud of myself because I would put them in the stalls of the women's bathrooms where it was least expected. I walked around campus with flyers and tape, putting those flyers everywhere because I wanted to share my joy about these conversations, these debates, you know, the love fest that was going on, the intellectual stimulation. That's how much I loved Black Nia F.O.R.C.E. I wanted everybody to know. I would tape the flyers on benches on the yard just because, not knowing anybody, but I was that inspired, that intellectually stimulated. So a lot of my education came from Black Nia F.O.R.C.E, those conversations. And that is not to say that what was going on in the classroom what was subpar. It absolutely wasn't. Um, May Baraka helped me. Who was the and Dr. Myers, you can help me too. Dr. Russell, somebody was the head of.
Russell Adams.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, he was one of my professors. Yes. Learned so much. And in my English classes, I learned about our culture through poetry. you know, through the literature, of course. So I was just, it was an amazing space to be in. It's what I expected and more. So much of my political education came through Howard, and I think this is important to note as well, Dr. Myers. Um, I had a sense of what was going on, of course, in terms of current events. I wasn't a news junkie. I was not. I could have a surface conversation about what was going on, be it Howard Beach or whatever. The thing that I knew the most, besides stats, besides details, besides remembering people's names, the thing that I knew most was that it was wrong. That's the thing that I knew most, that it was wrong, it was not righteous, that we as a community deserved better. I couldn't quote NASDAQ nor detail, no ideology. I didn't have any of that language. I didn't have any of the, and I don't think it's this is needed per se. It's important, but I was driven by a sense of what was righteous, what was just, and whatever I needed to do as 18 or 19-year-old to amplify the fact that this was wrong. I just wanted to be a part of it. No aspiration whatsoever. I just knew that it was wrong, what was going on. And I knew that Howard was the place that was going to help me find the language, help me find the discipline to articulate the greatness of who we are, first and foremost. I knew enough to know that talking about Black people couldn't always be in the context of us being brutalized. You understand what I'm saying? So my dual mission was to amplify the greatness, to be honest about collectively where we could do better, and to make sure that what was wrong was righted.
And so Black Nia Force, Black Nia, the Swahili term for purpose. What about this word, this acronym FORCE? Can you talk a little bit about where that came from? I think it's one of the most interesting parts of the story.
Yeah, I think this guy, the gentleman name was John. I can't. I'm trying to remember his last name. I can't. But he came up with the acronym at a meeting that we were early on trying to put together. What we were trying to call ourselves. You know, first the Sons of Panthers was what we were toying around with. Then the Sons and Daughters of Panthers, because Gail Sharp had showed up. And so he came up with this acronym FORCE, Freedom Organization for Racial and Cultural Enlightenment. And the concept behind FORCE, that it was a vector, right? It had speed and direction, you know, as a body at rest remains at rest until acted upon by some force. Force was the mass times acceleration, all of those things. See, I still remember all this stuff. Our job was to accelerate the masses. We thought the people were apathetic, and we would be the force that would accelerate them to get them moving and active and engaged in the community. That's incredibly relevant. It was incredibly relevant then, and I think that whole concept is relevant now. But that's where it came from, almost out of nowhere. That came, and then he never came back. That guy. So I don't know what his purpose was, but he fulfilled it that day.
It was divine, as you said earlier. You know.
Yeah, I always thought that was both profound and prescient. And so at a certain point, Mayor Baraka, you decide to step down from the leadership of the group. You all had burst onto the scene on campus. I remember reading in my research the Hilltop story, talking about the founding of the organization. And for a strong year, it's growing and building, and then you make the decision to step down. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's critical to how we understand leadership.
Well, I think that one, like even now, I think one, you have to be kind of reflective. And I thought that I've outgrown my usefulness in that position, right, for the organization's growth and for what it is that we were trying to accomplish. At the time, I thought it was incredibly important in the beginning for me to be there because it was a very male-centered, testosterone-driven kind of organization. All of these guys from these places that were usually at odds, Philly and New York, New Jersey, all these other places. and we were trying to always show who was the coolest, the best, the baddest. And it was important, for me, because people view me in a certain way to be in charge of the organization. Plus, they wanted me to because I called a meeting together. They think it was the most appropriate thing for it to happen. But I knew that the organization had to grow and move into a certain place, and I just thought I couldn't take it there at that time, and it needed somebody else to do that, and I could play the role that I needed to play, which was make sure that nothing happened to the people that we put in charge, and that we protected the organization and the leadership of the organization, as much as we could do that, and the contradictions that existed, with the organization, with me, with everybody else, that it was easier for us to get the direction and at the speed we wanted to go with somebody else at the helm of it. And so I made a decision to do that, to step down.
And then there's a process that led to Ms. Silver being elevated to that position.
Yeah,
and I just want to get, okay.
Go ahead.
I just want to get your reaction, Ms. Silver. Like, what are you thinking as your name gets put forth as the successor?
I had no idea why. I didn't know the guys. I really didn't know anyone, and it was a shock. It was a complete surprise. I don't know what made me accept the nomination. I don't know. That's the God honest truth. I just didn't know where it came from. If I had to guess, if I remember, I would likely believe that they probably saw that I was a hard worker, and so that probably is what attracted them to it. What made me think that I could be in that position following who we all knew as Raz at the time? I couldn't tell you. I do know that when I got the position, I knew that I wanted to bring whatever my gift, my talent was, and it was around organization. It was later that I found out that the guys thought, and Mayor Baraka, you can, address this, but it was later that I found out the guys thought that I was going to be a puppet, that they would find this person that nobody knows, with no stature, no influence, but some worker bee, and they were just going to be able to tell me what to do, so that the vision and whatever would be maintained. That's what I heard. I think Chuck told me that. Charles Webb, told me that years later. And I thought it was the most hilarious thing in the world. I was like, oh, y'all didn't know me. Because that would have never happened.
I don't know where Chuck got that from, but I don't know if that was the dominant thing. I think Carlisle was there. I mean, Carlisle was involved in it a lot too, in the beginning. And just I think people knew people liked you, So it was important for the organization to have somebody in charge of it that people gravitated towards, and and people did think that you could work, that you worked hard, and so forth and so on, that you could take the organization to another place.
Right.
I don't think that people believed, like, even if they said that, like,
okay,
silly. I don't think that people even believed that was the case. I think ultimately what the guys that were at that point understood, that it was a lot of responsibility. I think ultimately what happened was people began to feel like, myself included, like this is too much responsibility for us at this time, right? And we began to look for somebody else to lead. Plus, we began to see that, that where we were going, we were becoming popular, there was things we needed to do, stuff we needed to make happen, that we were not equipped to take the organization to the level that it needed to go. Right. And there was nobody that we could agree upon, especially in the area of the guys, that's for sure. I mean, we already wiped everybody out when we looked at the guys. I mean, and in terms of everybody else, I think April was just the obvious choice to us, and we talked about it, we didn't have no men's meeting to discuss it. I think Carlisle, myself, Chuck, maybe somebody else had a discussion about, when I told them that, I don't want to do this no more.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about Carlisle Seeley, just for those who don't know or who have yet to read the book. Yeah, yeah, I feel you.
It was Carlisle Seeley who first told me the story about the transition, and that really matches what he told me. Despite the fact, Chuck Webb and I had probably the longest interview, and his perspective on the transition was one thing, but he was also able to see how the challenges of organizing Black students at Howard required a different voice at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, that's true.
And so the year turns 1989, the winter of 1989. I'm going to start evoking some more names from the group. And one I would definitely want to invoke at this point is Ariane Pope, who is, she receives a call from her father in Meridian Hill Hall. And he tells her, and he asks her, what are y'all about to do? And she says, about what? And he tells her about Lee Atwater being appointed to the Board of Trustees on February the 1st. And she brings it to Black Nia F.O.R.C.E, and you are immediately faced with a huge problem, right? Because you have been doing all of this work on this really internal development of our people, of our students. One of the words that was so consistent was dealing with apathy and using awareness to address apathy. And now you have the potential of a political figure in a position of real influence on campus who is openly anti-Black, right? And so the question is, what are we going to do? Can you all recall what you all were thinking at that particular moment in February 1989 when you received this news?
I'll follow you.
It was everywhere. I mean, you go to some classes and the professors was like quietly ridiculing you in some kind of way. It was professors saying, oh, this guy is going to be on the Board of Trustees. And so it's like you feel almost obligated to respond to it. And, it was all over the community and TV, so it wasn't a secret, right? And I felt immediately that something needed to be done. And I also felt that we were compelled to do it, and that nobody else would be able to get it done but us. And I honestly believe that, because April was in charge of the organization at that time, it was easier for us to do it. And that's probably why it was supposed to happen when it happened. I honestly, the role that I played in the protest part was at that time at Howard was the best role that I could have played, and pulling together the folks from Cook Hall and all the other guys that are out there, going to speak to them, organizing the outside security, doing all that kind of thing. My reach into all of these circles, right? I had reach into all of these different circles, which helped me to be able to mobilize. And I was pretty good at mobilizing. It's the organization part that we needed April really for, you know what I mean? Because we could talk real slick and fill up the flagpole with 150 people easily. Keeping 150 people there is what has always been the issue at that time. And I think because all of that happened, my initial reaction was, look, we got to do something. We got to do it today, and going to Nia F.O.R.C.E meetings. I think that was the general sentiment. I think everybody came to the meeting in their mind, like, this is what we joined the organization for. Let's get it.
Yeah. I remember that day a bit, and Ariane Pope, like you said, came, and I remember her. Ariane is passionate, right? And she brought all of that passion to the meeting when she explained it, and I don't remember being aware of that appointment. I remember learning about it first, and I could be wrong, but I remember hearing about it first from Ariane. But to Mayor Baraka's point, why else are we here? Why else are we a part of this organization but to challenge this, but to amplify the noise about this and to to get people riled up. What are we doing here if not to oppose this? Everybody instinctively knew that this was dead wrong. Um, uh, and it was 2 weeks from the moment that she brought that information to us in the general body Black Nia F.O.R.C.E meeting on a Friday. 2 weeks later, we were at Charter Day. So you talk about, to the mayor's point, mass mobilization, and it was a bit seamless. I don't want to say it was effortless, but it was seamless in terms of the research that we knew that we needed to do, and there were committees divided to what we always talked about, the division of labor, to find out more information and details. And that was a 14 day period, but we were driven. We were deeply insulted. We knew that this is not why we came to Howard University in the first place. It was very much of a how dare you? Like, who thought of that? You know? And so we were absolutely driven or pushed or both. But it was internal, you know, and we got to work.
It was actually so the meeting was on February 17th, I think, and then Charter Day was like March the 3rd. So you're absolutely right on that score,
Right.
which is a lesson because Nia F.O.R.C.E wasn't a mass organization. You didn't have a thousand members, right? So it actually took you all reaching out to the campus community, which is diverse. We know Black people aren't always all politically the same, right? And yet you were able to get enough people into the building on Charter Day to make that statement, to have that force like present. And so I think to the students who are here and listening to this and thinking about organizing, how are you all able to extend what you all were thinking to the wider campus community who may have been angered, but that didn't necessarily mean that they would be in any way moved to action? How did you get them to move?
I think part of it was, like I said, I think it's part will, but we had already been a presence on campus that people knew that we were doing what we believed in, right? We were ridiculed on campus. You have to imagine um, young Black men walking around in Black t-shirts, Black sweats, Black boots, and everybody had on a Black tam. We were radical, and part of the mayor's articulation about what it means to be radical that he drilled and poured into us as an understanding is it means to get to the source. The mayor was always known for getting a word and discovering the Latin meaning and unpacking the word and bringing it to and putting it before us in a poetic way and then politicizing it, so the rationalization is clear. So we were proud to be radical, right? And so that was the expectation. So people knew that there was no shiny glossy with us, right? There was no superficiality. Contradictions, yes. Problems, yes. Things that we had to learn, yes. Um, Sometimes we were collectively, arrogant in our approach, or we were young. Sonia Sanchez would come to us often and tell us and remind us, you're not the first smart Black student that's walking on the campus, right? So that's the thing that happens with young people, right? We just, for those who have adolescent children, and I used to teach adolescent youth, you just think you know everything. No matter how you try to, put it in a humble way, you kind of think you just know everything. So we had a bundle of contradictions, but we were real. The passion was real. We were going to do the research, and people expected that. So when we took a stance, people believed it, or at least believed that there was no ulterior motive except to educate and create awareness and to better ourselves individually and collectively. Um, and what accompanies that is the sheer work. The thing about Black Nia Force members is that we were not scared to work. We were not scared to challenge ourselves. We were gonna do the sacrifice, get the work done to create that awareness. So I hope I'm not going too much on the tangent regarding your question, but it was sheer labor and determination and not letting go until we could get more people. But what we had going for us was a deep level of authenticity in terms of what we believed in. So I'll leave it there for now.
So I think we had a plan, and April and leadership at the time organized a plan for us. We just executed, and I think, like going to the convocation was one thing. It turned into something else because you have different people involved. It grows almost like a snowball, right? So it moving downhill, gravity swells it, and you go in there, and it turns into other things, and people are inspired by the sheer imagination and courage of what you did, and they become a part of that. We also went and stopped classes too. We went around and stopped people's classes and pulled a few fire alarms, all kind of, I don't know if I can say all those things, but that's what we did. People came out of their class. We were at the flagpole having a rally, right? And people started coming around the rally, trying to see what was going on, pulling down the American flag, putting up the red, black, and green flag. I'm speaking, other people speaking, just really exciting the imagination of the folks and getting them ready to take it to another level. While we were doing that, April was, confronting the president of the university, James Cheek at the time, while we were really getting people ready. And this stuff was planned. Like that part of it wasn't spontaneous. It was a plan. Our job was just to execute the plan. That's how I look at it. My job at that point was execute plan. I was with a bunch of guys whose job was to get chains. We got chains. That's what we were supposed to do. We were supposed to lock the building up when it's time. We did that, right? And we did it efficiently. But we knew because of the plan before that we couldn't lock up the post office, that we couldn't do specific things because people told us this in advance. So we didn't just go in there arbitrarily. We started at the convocation, then it moved, because that did not bear fruit that we wanted, the administration building became obviously where we had to go next. And that's really how it happened.
And you're right, Mayor Baraka. I was addressing a larger point, but to complement what you're saying, very, very well thought out, very methodical. We broke up into all kind of subgroups, and we had a research committee, we had a logistics committee, we had an outreach committee that went to the College of Nursing. So to the mayor's point, we were determined to leave no stone unturned. So yes, we had will, we had determination, we had imagination, yes, but the intellect and the logistics, it was so much so that people didn't believe that we did that on our own. There was one point where people had said in the media and other individuals around the time that we were funded, that we were inspired by the Democratic Party. No one believed that this group of students actually came up with something so methodical and precise, and it worked. There was no assumption that we could have figured that out on our own. And we were not funded by, influenced by, nor in communication with anything of a sort, So just wanted to compliment the mayor's point as well.
Yes, and there's so much to be said about the amount of people who are involved in the organizing piece to this. You mentioned the post office thing, so that made me think about Aaron Lloyd. You mentioned other aspects about just the sheer amount of planning to take over the administration building, which began that Monday. And that makes me think of people like Kevin Williams and Jam Shakwe and others who had to figure out how to hold that building, how to keep not only the people inside safe and fed and taken care of, but to make sure that folks from the outside didn't come in who weren't supposed to be there. And that just takes an amount of organizing that required planning. I think it was Garfield Bright who told me that you all had somehow gotten your hands on the blueprint to the administration building. And so it was methodical, right? And so looking at the time, I just want to really get you all's views on, or just your perspective on those 3 days inside the building and how that experience really shaped this moment of just the idea of occupying a building and holding a building and the will that it took to really ensure that those demands were addressed by the administration.
I want to share that, we're talking about organization and the division of labor and such. It's important for people to know that you do talk about her, of course, in the book, but Cherie Warren was absolutely instrumental for the logistics, the organization. She embodied perseverance, right? She embodied the righteousness of the movement as well. And we rarely took two steps without each other. At the time, I was the head of the organization as executive minister. Cherie was the minister of administration. I believe that's the title we had, right? Minister of administration. Um, so, so I just want to make sure that we don't proceed without, definitely bringing that up. And you do bring it up in the book. But to your specific question about the 3 days, um, you know, it really was a nation in motion in a way, in a figurative way, right? We had all kinds of committees. Cherie and I and Will Sims and Cody Coleman and Zenobia White and Garfield Swaby, Rob Turner. We were
Dave Porter.
And Dave Porter for sure, without a doubt. And I think I still might be missing one or two other people. We were the designated ones. It was a coalition, but Black Nia F.O.R.C.E was the head of the coalition. So by default, because I was the head of the Black Nia F.O.R.C.E at that time, I had that leadership role. But we worked as a unit, um, sleepless nights, and it was decided internally that the mayor will be on the outside, right? Interfacing with the media, making sure that the messaging was right, making sure that the students knew what was going on. The cover of the book is this young man, Ras Baraka, yelling at the police. So what was very clear, we were very clear about our roles and our personalities and how that fit. I would not have done well yelling at the police, trying to get everybody energized. That wasn't my strength, so everybody played to their strengths. And the mayor did an excellent job. Everybody did an excellent job. But I remember the level of organization, and people played to their own strengths, their own talents. There were food committees, there were entertainment and arts committees going on each floor. We occupied the entire building.
Right.
There was security, involved. It was just, it was just absolutely amazing on every front. It was the epitome of us coming together. And again, people still to this day just didn't believe that we had the imagination, the resources, the intellect, the inspiration, the endurance to pull this off. And the other element that was really important was the community itself. I love to tell the story. We all love to tell the story about Kathy Hughes, who we now know as the head of what is it, Urban One. But this was before Radio One. This was before Kathy Hughes, the entrepreneur, had all of the radio stations or whatever. She was just at WOL AM. She played a significant role in us staying alive in the building. You talk about it in the book as well. she got on the airways and made sure that the community was in support. So, you know, because of her support, we had more food than we could consume. You know, the boxes that came into the building to support us when we were occupying the building included sanitary napkins and tampons. You know, like all those practical kinds of things was absolutely amazing. And then I'll pause here, but we, in a lot of ways, owe our lives to Mayor Marion Barry. May his soul rest in peace. Um, we might not be alive to this day were it not for his I'm sure uh, for his intervention, you know, if you will. So I'm not sure if I completely answered you know your question, but we could circle back to it. But it was just layers upon layers of organization and work and determination. I'll just pause there.
Yeah, I got about 3 hours of sleep the entire time that we were there because I was supposed to be outside. I remember sneaking in the building one day and Glennis waking me up, who was a member of Nia F.O.R.C.E, telling me, you ain't supposed to be in here, go back outside. And, you know, them bringing me food and all kind of stuff. So I was outside most of the time, but every floor had a role and responsibility. You had to study, you had to be on one floor where it was quiet so you can study and do all that. We let people in the building at a certain time, and we let people out of the building at a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
I was responsible for helping make that stuff happen on the outside. In order to move through the building, there was a passcode you have to have. You cannot just walk freely through the building. And the passcode was the white man is still in charge. Right?
I hated that password so much.
I can remember Jesse Jackson coming and he knocking on the door. They said, it's Jesse Jackson. They was like, what's the password to Jesse Jackson? He turned to me. I looked at him. I said, hey, it's the white man is still in charge. And that's what he said. I mean, it was the time. It was, you know, we were young. It was that time. And,
right.
You know, it was just very serious for us. And, you know, I tried to get as many people involved. That's not normally political or not normally involved in this to be involved in it. And the thing that I remember the most out of all of it is when I was on a school of social work. There's a railing right there, and on the roof part, you know, basically nodding out. When I opened my eyes fully, it was a police helicopter in Baraka Field, and people were getting in the helicopter. And I was like, well, what the heck is going on? They actually got out of a bus and got into a helicopter, and they flew the helicopter over here, and they were dropping people out of the helicopter on the roof. Now, there was this strategy that people had to put people on the stairs in case people came, so they you know, couldn't move. And I was yelling, like, get those people off the stairs, because these, you know, they were just coming in full force. I mean, they bust the windows in the front door, cut a hole in the ceiling and the roof. I mean, they really was coming to throw us out of there, do harm. So when April says that Marion Barry, his presence, man, it was serious. It was really, really, really intense. So the picture you see of me yelling is not like a photo op, you know. We were like under attack, and we were in physical confrontation with the police and some security guards, but all of Howard security, a lot of them called out sick that day in support of what we were doing, because one of our demands was that they should be paid better.
Right.
So a lot of them called out sick, but those who stayed, we were in direct confrontation with those guys on the side door, and it got ugly for a little while. And then Marion Barry showed up, and the sun came back out.
Yeah, it's important for people to know to amplify the mayor's point here. The they was very much the police, local DC police and SWAT teams.
That's right.
And with battering rams, guns drawn, like landing on the roof of a 4-story administration building. And when the mayor talks about Baraka Field, he's talking about the park across the street, this wide open park, football field size at least. So he's talking about helicopters landing there. So it was an operation, and they weren't coming in to say, hi, how you doing? Would you mind leaving the building? And it was his father who at some point in this process, I forget the order of it, but meaning the mayor's father, Mary Baraka, who was our intellectual guidepost, if you will, reminded us that the state has killed students for less than this. So there was a reminder, to the mayor's point, that we are embattled. This is not cute. There's nothing simple about this. Your lives are in danger and you could die. So it really was a life or death scenario, for that period of time. And um, very few people, I don't want to quantify how many people, but enough of us were clear that we wanted to continue. Like for some of us, it wasn't a choice. We were willing to put our lives on the line, and we did, in order to stand up for what we believe and what we wanted Howard to come. And I'd like to just say this point. This book that you did, and this story and all of that, is so much bigger than Howard University. I really want people to understand that this is not, this book doesn't exist so people could, be sentimental, about what happened 30 years ago. This book doesn't exist because we want to remember our glory days. Most of us are in our 50s, right? And at the time we were in our 20s, at the time. So this is not about um, just being sentimental. uh, I think, an emotional response and reflecting is important, but this is really about the continuation of what the movement for liberation looks like. What radical love looks like. 30 years later from 1989, prior to 1989, and how does it show up today, 2020, in our personal lives, in our careers? What are the stances that we're taking now? So I'll save that maybe for the Q&A, but I just think it's important, as you illustrate in the book, um, what drove us, and why we were doing this in the first place. But when you make those kinds of decisions and you're clear about it, you could end up putting your life on the line, as we did. That's the point.
Ashe, Ashe. I think in the interest of time, going to kind of fast forward and give a somewhat of a summary of the story, and then move into some of these questions. There are a lot of questions here.
I see.
So yeah, Ethelbert Miller is here, and he asked about Bill Cosby, and that could be a whole nother 10 minutes conversation. But yes, it was Bill Cosby who had to move, to put it nicely, because the students had business to take care of. He was not allowed to speak, which is kind of interesting because you all were not necessarily impressed by celebrity in the same way that we kind of see now. Not only was Bill Cosby, it was like, okay, yeah. And then Jesse Jackson shows up and people are like, yeah, okay. And so it's very interesting given the stature that those two figures had in that particular moment. But the police intervention is really important because it speaks to the notion of space. Who does space belong to? And, that was something that had to be reckoned with. And then, when because of Bill Cosby and others, the national news media shows up at Howard, and those cameras pick up the attempt by the police to intervene in the building, and is broadcast across the world. And so you're right, this is not just a narrow Howard story. It became a world historical event in many ways. Maybe we can speak to that in the Q&A as well. And so when those cameras showed up and this is broadcast, Atwater almost has no choice but to step down, right? And so he steps down, and then you all stay in the building an additional day to complete negotiations with the administration, because again, this was just one of 7 demands. Atwater's removal was just one of 7 demands. And then you added 3 more demands. I think Donald Temple is here, who played a crucial role in helping you all. And so finally you leave the building, and then for the next few months, you struggle to get those demands implemented. The next academic year, you all continue to struggle to get those demands implemented. And then you decide that spring to run for student government. You win, and then you have this moment, you have a year in essentially in power with student power, with the lever of student power to try to transform Howard. And so I think that kind of speaks to some of the questions about the links between protest and organizing and some of the things that you were able to accomplish. And I don't know if you all want to speak to your year as leadership of the Howard University Student Association. But that, I think that's a crucial legacy of the protest, because it then builds from there, right? And so you enter into the 90s with all of this experience, and everything that you all have done since is really, I think, I would argue, is connected to that particular moment. So I don't know if you all want to speak to that, or if you want to go straight to the questions, or I'll just leave it up to you all.
Well, you're right. One built upon the other. It was I think we were in the School of Engineering, maybe, when we decided, I don't know who first had the idea. Maybe the mayor already had this idea, but not only did we decide to run for what is known as HUSA, the Howard University Student Association, but we had also collectively decided that we were going to run for all of the student councils, right? So that was, to the mayor's point, that was by design. That was not anything ad hoc. We as an organization knew that for an organization that was unofficial on campus, we had to leverage our power and tap into those resources that is made available to student governments of the entire student body, which was the Howard University Student Association and the student councils. I want to shout out Ona Austin, who was the first woman president of Howard University. I think the year before I entered Howard in 1986, right? So I think she was the student body president, maybe, I don't know, maybe the term before I entered. So what that did was make me the second woman president of the student organization in all of Howard's history. But that's I only say that to shout out Ona, right? But in terms of the leadership that she played, because she was no joke. But what Black Nia F.O.R.C.E did was bring in all of us. Cherie Warren was the program director, if I'm not mistaken. When the mayor and I became elected, we just brought in the organization. Cherie Warren was the program director. The mayor and I shared an admin executive secretary, which was Sandy, who I think is in the chat as well. Sandy Caesar. So, and then we created new positions as well. I remember very clearly we created the entrepreneurship director, because this notion of coming to a college campus just to get a job and work for someone else, was problematic for us. So we created for the first time an entrepreneurship director, so that we could explore what it means to be your own boss if you're going to go that route. And Mayor, what did we have as well? The student athlete liaison, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we created positions. We weren't okay with just accepting, the status quo. So we brought some creative thinking to that as well. So I'm hoping.
And we ran for multiple. We didn't just run in Houston. We ran for this other
Right.
the student government,
the student councils in the different schools and colleges.
Well,
yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a plot. Yeah. But
Okay, so
I wanted to answer one of these things. I think Marion Barry was supportive of the protest.
Mm-hmm.
What he did was remove the police. So I just want that to be clear. And that's really what his job is. He came up to the campus and told the police to get off of the campus and leave those kids alone. It's his exact words. He said, we got other stuff in the city to be dealing with, drugs, murder. He said, you're going to be up there messing with those kids. Get off of the campus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's critical. That was critically important. Else we wouldn't be able to stay in there for no extra day.
Right.
We'd have been out that day.
Right. Right. And you know, Mayor, you often talk about the responsibility of the elders or those in position. I'm just having a flashback to one of your talks as an adult, as a mayor. You talked about the importance of running interference, right? And so you're illuminating that by highlighting that Mayor Marion Barry ran interference because, as you point out, and many of us know, he was a member of SNCC.
Yeah,
You know, when he was a student, so he brought a understanding and a sensibility about student activism and what it means to you know, to do this work and continue this legacy, and it saved our lives. So yeah, and let me shout out also Rhea Young.
yeah.
It yeah, was the admin for the mayor when we were in student government. So shout out to Sandy for correcting me, um, for sure. Yeah.
So one of the questions I want to make sure we get answers from a current student, Toby Moshe Balogun. And his question actually has two questions in here. But I'll ask the second one because you're talking about HUSA right now. And we know the pressures of being a student leader coming from all corners. And his question was, how did you all maintain your independence while you were
Inde-
student leaders?
Independence in what way? As an organization, or I'm
I
not.
guess he's speaking to the independent politics or the
Yeah.
reasons that you uh, decided to run in the first place. How did you maintain that consistency and connection and continuity with the purpose that you all ran?
We were part of an organization. I would say that, you know, but I don't think we even thought about it though either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just, you know, I couldn't even imagine like these people telling us what to do or what we couldn't do. Not at that time, you know. I was 19 years old in the administration building doing that, you know. So there's no way in the world these people was going to tell us what to do at that time when we thought we were invincible. And we were part of an organization. We were part of a larger organization that we still went to the meetings, we still talked to the people, we still were involved in that. That keeps you grounded and focused. And that's what Kwame Ture always used to say. You have to be a part of an organization, organize, organize, organize.
Mm-hmm.
And April said something about the Democratic Party. I know one party that was active on that campus. That was the All African People's Revolutionary Party.
Absolutely.
And that was an organization started by Stokely Carmichael and Kwame Ture, who folks always echoed organize, 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 organize. And being a part of the organization was incredibly helpful.
And I was a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party as well. So yeah, we had that in the backdrop, on the side, in the front of us, all around us. We had that as fuel and understanding, for sure.
There's a question, I think, from Letitia Lee. I think I'm hoping I'm getting that name correctly, around the immediate aftermath and how participating in the protests affected you. I think she's speaking to the harassment that you all faced, or the repression that you all faced. And one of the things that she sort of asked is, how long did that stigma stick on you, and what did you do about it?
That's a heavy one. You mentioned it in the book. The harassment was real, for all of us. I'll talk about my part. I knew, and you mentioned this in the book as well. I was getting death threats on a regular basis. I don't know how the skinheads somewhere in Middle America found the telephone number to my dorm room, but I would come home, you know, while we're doing all of this work, to all of these death threats. And because the security arm of Black Nia Force was what it was, I had security for months. The members of Black Nia Force, the men and the women of Black Nia Force who were part of security, were with me 24 hours, except when I went to the bathroom. You know, because it was just that, you know, the death threats were real. You know, to the credit of Donald Temple, we did as much as we could as he advised us as our lawyer for the coalition, that we had to institute language and provisions to make sure that there was no retaliation from the administration. that we wouldn't get expelled, that those kinds of things. I don't know that we thought of that were it not for Donald Temple, right? Um, but that was on paper, but in real life, and I'll turn it over to the mayor because I know he has his own stories, but it was real, it was traumatic. Um, it took years for me to even think about some of the work and the emotional toll, and doing that at 20 something years old. I didn't even decompress from the emotional impact, for years and years and years later. So I'll pause there because I know the mayor has some other serious harassment going on as well.
Well, I think the most troubling part with me was, they just tried to deregister me.
Mm.
So I mean, all the other stuff, that went on, you almost expected like this kind of foolishness. And, we did what we could to protect each other, and we did that. But, I had to go to every teacher and get my, schedule signed, all this stuff by teachers to get validated,
Mm-hmm.
because they just took my validation. You had these validation cards, they just invalidated me, and I was basically not a student, but I was going to class, taking tests, and by the grace of God, that probably was my best semester. Was during the protest semester was my best semester, and I attribute that to Black Nia F.O.R.C.E.
Mm-hmm.
Because Black Nia F.O.R.C.E. encouraged study and success and intelligence, which forced you to read and study and do your work because you had to be excellent, academically, and that was important. And so that was my best semester. And so when I went to those teachers, it was easy for me to get signatures from teachers, from professors, saying he was in his class, this is the grade that he got, and I had to go to the administration building. And God knows everybody who goes to Howard in past, present, and future knows how horrible going to the administration building can be, trying to get registered and validated and all of that stuff. So it was a nightmare just trying to go through that process.
One of the things that comes up a lot, and I wanted to just say this, I'm not going to ask a question about this, but there was a very real support from Black political leaders, Black cultural leaders, everyone from Jesse Jackson to Sonia Sanchez to Amir Baraka to Tony Cade Bombara, that really was important to this entire project. But connected to that, there are two kind of related questions. One is concerning faculty support, and I think we can weave in an answer to this other question related to what books guided you, what texts were important in this moment.
The Black students guide to positive education. Go ahead.
No.
That condo.
But yeah, that was our Bible, our dictionary, our everything. You had to know that. So that was one text. But and Stolen Legacy by
George G.M. James.
Yeah. I remember that, and all of that was just
Europe, underdeveloped Africa.
Absolutely.
Walter Rodney.
Yeah, Walter Rodney.
So we had a lot of texts, and we had artists. We had Sonia Sanchez. We had Muda Baruka. On campus, we had just a variety of different artists, and we brought in lecturers when we were in student government. But I'm forced to remember the mothering that we got from Mrs. Roberta McLeod. I have to say that out loud, because she is all of our mothers, our Howard mother. And when you talk about people standing by us and giving us guidance and giving us, understandings and nuances that we just would not know. As students, we would not know the administration and the operations and who's your friend in the administration and who's not, who's smiling in your face, and and what happened in the boardroom that you should be aware of. Like, we had a tremendous amount of support, and I just, we talk about the faculty a lot in terms of that support, but I want to shout out a woman who wasn't faculty, the moral support that she gave us. Everybody knows Miss McLeod, so I want to make sure that she, you know, that she knew that as well.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of those people's children went to the school too, you know. So a lot of their kids were there. So they were concerned about those kids' safety and everything else that was going on there as well. So that was one part of it, you know. Nobody called their mother and father and got permission to do this. We just did it. And so at the end of the day, people's parents found out when we were already in the A building or when things was already hitting the fan. They're like, hey, what are you doing? It's on TV, you know, all this other stuff. So, you know, that got people to say, listen, we need to make sure that these are kids, that they're okay, that they're safe. And that was, my mother talks about that all the time, you know. She said, I told your father, you better get down to DC and find out what's going on, you
Right.
know, or call these people. I son up in that building. All of this kind of stuff is important. You know, Howard is a legacy. So there are people there, there are expectations that people have of the university, whether you like it or not, good or bad. And they're going to have their imprint on it, and they feel obligated to raise the students of this university collectively.
Right.
And so they were on it. And then now, which is different from today, then, which is different from today, we had the luxury of a plethora of speakers, as April pointed out, maybe 1 million different conferences we would go to.
Yeah.
All of this kind of stuff helped to shape our ideology and direction at the time. Today, I can barely think of conferences that these folks go to. We must have had like 5 different Malcolm X conferences, Mega Evans conference, this hip hop political convention, all kind of stuff was going on, you know, that helped us kind of gather around and support one another.
And I want to shout out, we can't underestimate the importance of, for me personally and us collectively, was the influence of Sonia Sanchez. You know, when I was an Alpha Sweetheart, I met Sonia Sanchez through her son, Marani, because we were in English class together. And when I discovered, because again, I'm being introduced to Black poetry and Black literature, all at this, you know, as a freshman, sophomore, I'm writing for the Hilltop. I was an editor for Janus, which was the literary magazine or newsletter for the English department. I'm discovering all of this. And when I found out that Sonia Sanchez's son was in my English class, that began a lifelong relationship that exists today. And so when she would come to campus, it was at the invitation of me at the time when I was head of the Alpha Sweetheart Court, right? And she would come on her own every weekend with no pay. We paid her one time to come because we invited her in as a speaker, as the mayor said. And she was like, I will come back every week. You don't have to pay me. There's no honorarium. Just give me a Amtrak ticket and I will be here every week. And she was. So to the mayor's point about what we had access to and a level of commitment that people, not only her, but Sonia Sanchez gave to us, we could sit at her feet every week. And we did in the reading lounge of the Blackburn and ask her questions. But it wasn't just about, hey, how was your life? But we were studying, right? You know, she brought us texts and we studied. But connected to that was issues of character, right? Issues of personal development. What does it mean when you have an organization? And one thing she always said, you got to make sure that there's an even number of men and women in leadership. So it wasn't just about texts and intellectual exercises, but it was about how to organize, how to build, how to be honorable in your work, how to respect one another, and what to look out for. So I just need to, to say that part as well, because it was just as crucial as any text that we learned from a professor on campus.
Thank you for that. I'm going to wind to a close, but I do see Kimry Hughes here. His role was just as important as Marion Barry's role.
Absolutely.
Kimry Hughes was the deputy mayor of youth services at the time. We definitely want to shout him out. And just really quickly, some other faculty that people may or may not remember, but Ronald Walters was crucial.
Of course I remember.
Eleanor Traylor, Joseph McCormick, Alvin Thornton,
Those are all my teachers.
Yeah, yeah. So the political science department in particular. Yeah. And so we can close with this final question. This is from Jocelyn Imani, and I think it's an important one, and it'll give you an opportunity to talk about your life since Howard. And she wants to know what were some of the connections, or how strong were those connections that were forged in this moment of protest to who you became and what you became when you left Howard University, when you graduated.
So, I mean, just, you know, I had a political science major in history. I learned more about Black people and history in political science classes than I ever learned in any history class anywhere ever. I had Ron Walters, I had Alvin Thornton, constitutional law, I had Joe McCormick, I had all of these people. And I learned so much there, and it kind of prepared me politically. Ron Walters would say to me that, you know, the first step is getting into the conversation. If you're not in the conversation, then what you think and feel does not matter. How do you engage yourself into the conversation, into the national conversation, into what's happening, which was the first thing I thought of about why I should run for office in the first place. Even if I didn't win at 24 years old when I ran for mayor, the idea was just get into the conversation. And we always repeated that. We're trying to get into the conversation. I'm trying to, all of our agenda, what we want, what we believe, we need to insert that into the conversation. And I get in that by getting into a debate. If I get into the debate, then I can do that. And the only way I can get into the debate is I have to get on the ballot. So I can be invited to the debate. And that was it. And I think all of the organizing that I learned, because I did not know how to organize. All the organizing that I learned came from my experience in Black Nia F.O.R.C.E and watching other people and April and all the other things and the things that were going on. You know, I've always been good at mobilizing, at exciting people, at rallying them up. But you can't win elections by mobilizing people, right? You have to turn mobilization to organization. We won HUSA. That was a foray into politics to begin to understand how that thing works. You know, and my brother, who is a better organizer than me, to this day, was able to turn all of the things that I was feeling and saying we should do into something real in terms of how to organize that to win office. But, you know, all of the stuff we've been through at Howard makes you feel like you're obligated to do something when you leave here. That you have to, when you leave Howard, you have to make something happen. We were on campus with Kasim Reed, who was the mayor of Atlanta, you know, with Puffy, who became, you know, the super mogul, Dick Gregory's kids, Sonia Sanchez's kids, Tony K. Bombara's kids, on and on and on and on and on. And Howard just makes you feel like if you leave the campus and do something mediocre, that you have not fulfilled your obligation. And being in Nia F.O.R.C.E, you know, had me on go all the time. You know, I've been on go since I joined Nia F.O.R.C.E. And since we helped make Nia F.O.R.C.E happen, I've been on go. And I wasn't on go before Nia F.O.R.C.E. That's not who I was setting out to be. Honestly, when I first stepped foot at Howard University's campus, if it wasn't for Black United Youth and then Black Nia F.O.R.C.E, I would never have taken the trajectory that I've taken from that point on, good or bad, failures and successes, to be where I am today.
You know, I agree 100% with everything the mayor said. How that looked for me was a little bit different. When I graduated, I didn't know what to do. You know, someone had told us we were on the terrorist list after the protests. I had not done the things, nor had I properly prepared to go into the marketplace. So I lied to you not, and Mayor, I don't know if I've ever said this, but at the time, my best idea for what to do upon graduation was, well, maybe I can, the mayor was the fiery one. I was behind the scenes and I was quiet, right? I was the organizer, like he said. I said, maybe I can manage his career. I had no thought about what to do. So that is the only reason why I enrolled in graduate school at Howard, right? In the English department, because I had not done my work, but I knew I wanted to continue along this journey. So I got accepted to grad school at Howard. I did 1 year. I did 1 year. Shout out to Dean Keene, who helped me to become a resident assistant, an RA. So I did 1 year. And it was only then that I realized that I was exhausted, because what we want to remember is that there was the protests, and then there was HUSA, the Howard University Student Association, and then there was the hip hop conference. There was no, that, like that, to the mayor's point, we were on go 100%, because we weren't even impressed with the protests. Only. We were happy, but we had said this, we're not done. That's why we stayed even after Lee Atwater resigned. People questioned, well, why are you still in the building? That's what you wanted. That was the ultimate goal. And we were like, no. So I only say that to say that we knew that we had more of our destiny to fulfill, right? So we had all of these ground, earth shattering, pivotal things that were pivoting us and changed the trajectory. There was no discussion about hip hop and the academy before we as a collective said we have to talk about hip hop and put it in a collegiate setting to deconstruct the culture and the business. And we bought, when it was easy to bring Dougie Fresh and Biggie before he was Biggie, we that's a whole nother component, right? But
Yeah,
my
it's a whole
point,
nother book.
it's a whole nother book. It is.
Yeah.
It is. It is. And it may it be so. But my point is to say that we were doing groundbreaking work regularly. For me, that translated as I didn't have a chance to process. So I went to graduate school because I didn't know what else to do. And then I failed, right? When I learned that a C in graduate school was equal to failure, I was like, oh, I'm out. I thought I was doing well, right? Because I got a C. I was like, I survived my first year. And then I learned, that it wasn't. I was like, yeah, I'm out. And that's when I went to go work for Dougie Fresh as his assistant, because he was doing groundbreaking work and wanting to mobilize hip hop artists. And so that lasted a year. I didn't have a plan of action. And then I went into teaching, right? So it was around that time that the idea for me for AKILA WORKSONGS came into existence. And AKILA WORKSONGS is my communications and marketing agency. It's 27 years old, the agency. So I've been self-employed for 27 years, amplifying the voices of social justice activists and artists and nonprofits and philanthropics. So I designed a path for me out of not knowing what else to do, but knowing that I wanted to stay in this conversation around arts and activism and what radical love looks like, and how can I do that on my own terms. I did teach for about 3 or 4 years. Cherie and I together, we went to I think it was called the Board of Ed at the time. We went together. She stayed on with the Board of Ed and she's a principal now. I stayed on for a couple of years. And then I was like, I love these young people in Brooklyn, but this is not precisely my calling. I want to stay in education, but not in the classroom. So I continued and made my business my full-time job as opposed to my side hustle. And AKILA WORKSONGS to this day, at 27 years old, we are still doing this work in the community. We are the voices and the speech writers and the message developers of a lot of stuff that it's not even appropriate for me to say because we're behind the scenes. But it is still the work, it is still the continuation, because none of us, to the mayor's point, none of us are impressed with what we have done because we still have work to do. There's a song, not to be super corny, but for everybody who loves Stevie Wonder, there's a song from his album, Full, somebody put it in the chat. I can't remember the name of the album, but there's a song that talks about it's taking us so long because we've got so far to go. That's one of the lines from the lyrics. So we're still doing this work in different ways. Cherie Warren is a principal. Akanke is still working in education. Ras Baraka is now Mayor Ras, Baraka. Like we could go on, but some of us stayed in the movement. It's just showing up in different ways, you know. But I didn't have a clear cut path, you know, at the end. My understanding of what I needed to do, how I was going to use my talents, came, you know, a short journey afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it looks like that is our time. I want to thank April R. Silver and Ras J. Baraka, not only for being a part of this event, but for everything that you've done, and for the rest of Black Nia F.O.R.C.E and the people that participated in the protest. I want to publicly, again, thank you all for entrusting me with this story, which is, like you said, is all of our story.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an honor to be the person that put it on paper. And like you said, you know, the work continues. And so I just want to again thank everybody for participating, for being engaged in the chat. And we look forward to connecting to you all again.
Let me thank you, Dr. Myers, for your work and for your guidance. All of the professors. There's so many people we didn't name. This is it's impossible to name, but the professors. But I would say, stay in contact with us. You know, these are, you know, through social media or whatever, because we still have work to do. I think there's probably some unanswered questions, so we can continue this in whatever way. But thank you to you as well. Thank you to our ancestors, that remind us every day we got work to continue. Howard is sacred ground. Howard University is sacred ground, and we have to, you know, do what we can to make sure that it's accountable to the students.
Yeah.
You know, so I'll leave it there.
I just want to say thank you, man, for putting this together, inviting me to be a part of this, to take this trip down memory lane, think about a few things. I just saw Asantwa on the chat there.
Yeah.
AAPRP. It just brings back so many memories. So I appreciate it. Anytime you need me to be involved in a discussion like this, please call on me. I'm interested in participating.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. That does it.
Okay.
Have a good night, everybody.
Okay. Have a good night.